All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Books and Books in Coral Gables. Thank you all for coming down tonight to this very special evening with Gary Shteyngart. Thank you for being loyal to Books and Books and not being distracted by the party at the Colombian consulate across the street. Couple announcements before we start. Please silence your cell phones. I have also been asked by our director over there in the corner for no flash photography because, as you can see from these lights and these cameras, we're live streaming the event on the internet tonight. All of our events that have been live streamed will be archived on the Books and Books website. You could go to the link and you can watch any author appearance that we have live streamed here at your convenience. A message for our live stream audience at home: if at any time during the event you want to purchase a copy of tonight's book, call the number on your screen. We'll have Mr. Shteyngart autograph it for you, and we will mail it to you wherever you are in the United States free of charge. For those of you watching overseas, the shipping charge might be a little bit more. This evening, Books and Books is very happy to present Mr. Gary Shteyngart and his new memoir, Little Failure. We're very happy to have this event presented in collaboration with Just Ask Boo. And here to introduce Mr. Shteyngart, please welcome to the microphone the editorial director of Just Ask Boo, Ms. Victoria Asa.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I am so pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Gary Shteyngart, author of 2 acclaimed novels, The Russian Debutante's Handbook and Super Sad Love Story, and his brand new work, Little Failure, a Memoir. As a Soviet Jewish immigrant born into a family of Republican engineers who has led a remarkably parallel life to the author, from the Porta Portese market in Ostia to Solomon Schechter in Queens and later to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, I can say this with absolute certainty: Gary Shteyngart captures the immigrant experience perfectly. His memoir is simultaneously heartbreaking and humorous, giving the reader a glimpse of a young boy uprooted from his home at age 6 and placed, not so gently, into a world so starkly different, and yet with so many remnants of the world that they left behind. He describes this experience when he writes, "Coming to America after a childhood spent in the Soviet Union is equivalent to stumbling off a monochromatic cliff and landing in a pool of pure technicolor." Although his story is deeply personal, it is one that any immigrant can appreciate. As the editorial director of Just Ask Boo, I wanted to do a piece about Gary in advance of this event. And I thought that a Proust questionnaire would offer the perfect glimpse into the mind of someone I consider a great satirist. And he did not disappoint. In case you're curious, his idea of happiness is the hammam, rub, and scrub package at the Standard Spa Hotel. His greatest fear is to be trapped in a stalled elevator at the Airport Westin with no air conditioning, no cell phone reception, and no Ativan. And his greatest failure is his inability to get over 33,000 followers on Twitter. So please take a minute to follow him. And his greatest inspiration is Mitchell Kaplan, who, according to Gary, somehow still manages to sell books to people. So, without further ado, Gary Shteyngart.
Thank you for that amazing welcome. It is absolutely frightening how much we share. We're probably even related to one another, as all of us are. It is wonderful to be back in one of my favorite places in the world, Books and Books here in Coral Gable. Today, more than ever, I wish I was the Colombian First Lady. But that's not going to happen. Sorry I have to sit down. My doctor said I shouldn't ever stand up again. It might lead to being alive, and we don't want that. Also, I caught a terrible cold in Canada. Stay away from Canada at this point of the year. So the thing that I like the most about this book, little failure is clearly the cover, you know. For those of you who haven't seen it, there it is, and that's me. I'm about a year and a half old. It's Leningrad in 1974, and they had these photo studios where you could pose your child with the latest in Soviet technology, so, you know, like a phone. And this one, it's a car, and you can tell how scared I am of this thing, and I'm just sitting there with my hands, you know. And actually, only this year did I finally learn how to drive at age 41. So watch out, Florida. I mean, seriously, watch out. I'm a terrible driver. If you see me coming, I would turn around. Yes, and I just realized that in 18 years from now, I can finally retire here. So wait for me. I will be among you soon. This book is really about how I became a writer, and people often ask me, how do you become a writer? First, you got to be asthmatic. Very important. There's no way around that. You got to have asthma. I was just giving a reading in Seattle, which has a fine incidence of asthma, and people would bring me their asthma inhalers to sign instead of their books, which I thought it was the height of nerdish chic, you know. They had Gucci inhalers and stuff like that. But you got to have asthma to become a writer. There's no way around that. And I would grow up in a cold, damp place like Leningrad because it's actually built over a swamp, you know, which is perfect for asthma. And in 1974, there were no steroid inhalers in the Soviet Union, so you really got to see mortality up close as a child, because you were always about to die if you had asthma. And I still remember the wail of the ambulances in our courtyard always coming to take me to the hospital. Very good stuff for a writer, to be that close to death at age 3. Then you got to have, the second thing, you got to have a grandma who writes. And my grandmother, Galia, was a journalist for a paper called Evening Leningrad, which is much better than Morning Leningrad. I can tell you that one's the TMZ of Russian papers. And one day when I was 5 years old, she said to me, hey, asthma boy, you want to be a novelist? No? You know. I said, well, how much does it pay? You know. And she said, I'll give you a piece of cheese for each page you write. And my God, I loved that plasticky yellow Soviet cheese they had back then. And right outside of our window was the biggest statue of Lenin in all of Leningrad. I'm talking humongous, you know. And we called him the Latin Lenin because he always looked like he was about to rumba. He had his hand out. He was very handsome Latin Lenin. And each morning when I wasn't dying from asthma, I'd get up and I'd hug his pedestal because I just loved him so much. So my first novel for my grandmother was called Lenin and His Magical Goose. And in it, Lenin meets a goose, probably from Armenia or Georgia, someplace warm. And together they invade Finland and try to create a socialist revolution there. Then Lenin and the goose get into a huge political fight. The front piece of this book is a picture of me in the requisite Soviet sailor suit that 5-year-olds had to wear, reading a Talmudic-sized tome about the revolution of 1917. So I was deeply affected by the revolution of 1917 as a child. So in my book, it turns out, Lenin and the goose get into this huge political fight because it turns out that the goose is Menshevik. And Lenin, as we know, of course, is Bolshevik. And in the end, Lenin eats the goose. And I remember my grandmother saying, well, maybe that's too much. He doesn't eat the goose. Maybe he exiles the goose to Mexico. Ice pick, you know. But we also learned that Lenin suffers from asthma in the book. So very, very tender. So my grandmother loved it, and she paid me 100 pieces of Soviet cheese for the 100-page novel. Fun fact, even today, Random House pays me in cheese. That's how I get my royalties. So then we emigrated to America, and I had to leave Lenin behind, and I had to learn English and some Hebrew, because I was sentenced to 8 years of Hebrew school for a crime I did not commit. But Victoria spent 1 year in the same school as I did, but her parents yanked her right out of there. They were very good parents. They said enough. But I went through the whole 8 years, so boy, can I daven. But 1980 it wasn't just the fault of this particular Hebrew school. 1980 was a difficult time to be a Russian in America. Remember Ronald Reagan's Evil Empire speech, and all those movies, Red Dawn, Red Gerbil, Red Hamster, everything was red, 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 you know. And I pretended to the kids in our Hebrew school that I was actually born in East Berlin, not in Leningrad. So you know things are bad when you have to convince Jewish kids that you're actually a German. But there it was. I'd say, Sprachen Sie Deutsch? No? Plus, we were really poor, as many immigrants were, and I had only one shirt and one pair of pants and a bunch of T-shirts the parents of the kids in Hebrew school had donated. My toys were a pen, a Chewbacca action figure someone had given us that was missing half of one paw, and I had from Russia a fur coat and a fur hat made out of some woodland animal. And the teachers would actually take me aside and say, you really need to get rid of your fur, you know. Kids will play with you more if you're furless. Which is actually true in adulthood as well, I think. And then 2 years after we left Russia, something truly incredible happened that almost changed our lives forever. And I'm going to read you that one of those sections from the book. In 1981, an official letter arrives in our mailbox. Mr. S. Shteyngart, you have already won $10 million. Sure, our last name is misspelled rather cruelly, but cardstock this thick does not lie, and the letter is from a major American publisher, to wit, the Publishers Clearing House. I open the letter with shaking hands, and the check falls out. Pay to the order of S. Shteyngart. $10,000,000/$100. Our lives are about to change. I run down the stairs into the courtyard of our apartment complex. Mama, Papa, we won. Мы миллионеры. We're millionaires now. Успокойся, my father says. Calm down. Do you want an asthma attack? But he's nervous and excited himself. Around the glowing surface of the orange dining table imported from Romania, we spread around the contents of the voluminous packet. For 2 years, we have been good new citizens, accidentally watching X-rated movies like Emmanuel, The Joys of a Woman at the local theater. Getting jobs as engineers and clerk typists, my mother's pianist fingers will finally be put to meaningful use. Learning to pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the something for which that it stands, unavoidable with money for all. Боже мой, my mother says, my God, as we look at the pictures of a Mercedes flying off the deck of our yacht toward our new mansion with its Olympic-sized swimming pool. Oi, does it have to be a Mercedes? Tfu, Nazis. Don't worry, we can trade for a Cadillac. Well, the way I understand it, the house doesn't come with the prize. The prize is just $10 million, and then we buy the house separately. Tfu, they always say here, sold separately. You can forget about that yacht, Gary. It's dangerous. But I know how to swim now, Mama. How do you keep the pool open in the winter? Snow will get in. Look, there's palm trees on the envelope. Maybe this is in Florida. Florida won't be good for your asthma with all that humidity. I want to live in Miami. Maybe there aren't Hebrew schools in Miami. Everywhere in America, there are Hebrew schools. We sit down and, using our collective 400-word English vocabulary, begin to unravel the many documents before us. It says here that, yes, we have already won the $10 million, no disputing that, but a panel of judges still has to award the money to us. First, we must fill out the winner's form and to select 5 national magazines that will be sent to us free, or at least the first issue of each will be free, and then the Americans will likely send us the rest of the $10 million. Fair enough. First, we must acclimate to our new wealth, expand our literacy. I am proud of Papa's new car, a bulbous 1977 Chevrolet Malibu Classic with only 7 million miles on the odometer. But it's time to get acquainted with the finer autos. So I order car and motor, motor and driver, carburetor and driver, muffler and owner. And then for the last selection, something that maybe has my Star Wars monkey, Chewie Chewbacca, in it, Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. I walk solemnly to the mailbox and deposit our claim on the future. Adonai Eloheinu, I pray to our new God, please help us get the $10 million so that Mama and Papa will not fight so much and there will be no razvod, divorce between them. And let us live somewhere far away from Papa's wolfish relatives who cause all the trouble And let them not yell at Mama when she sends the money Papa says we don't have to her sisters and Grandma Galia in Leningrad, who has been dying for a very long time. Amen. That night in my dreams, I walk into the Solomon Schechter School of Queens, a multi-millionaire. And the pretty girl with the big teeth, who's always tan from her Florida vacation, kisses me with those big teeth. I haven't gotten the mechanics of kissing down yet. The kids make fun of Jonah Himmelstein, the school's biggest loser, but I say, hey, he's my friend now. Here is $2. Buy us both the Carvel Flying Saucer cookie ice cream, and keep the change, you garnished, you nothing. We find out the truth pretty quickly and brutally. At their respective workplaces, my parents are told that the Publishers Clearinghouse regularly sends out that you have already won $10 million missive, and that these are routinely thrown in the trash by the savvy native born. Depression settles over our non-millionaire shoulders. In Russia, the government was constantly telling us lies. Wheat harvest is up. Uzbek baby goats give milk at an all-time high. Soviet crickets learned to sing the Internationale in honor of Brezhnev's visit to a local hayfield. But we could not imagine that they would lie to our faces like that here in America, the home of the this and the land of the that. And so we don't give up hope entirely. The judges are probably reading our application right now. Maybe I should write them a letter in my burgeoning English. Dear Publishing Clearinghouse, spring is here, the weather is warm and rainy. Birds come from the south to sing songs. My mother's pianist fingers hurt very much from typing, and she has only one suit for work. Please send us the $10 million right away. We love you. Family Shteyngart. Meanwhile, Car and Parking and the other Publishing Clearinghouse magazines are starting to pile up, taunting us with the many hot, naked centerfolds of the new Porsche 911, the official sports coupe of Reagan-era excess. We reluctantly begin to cancel our subscriptions to all of them except for Asimov's science fiction magazine, a small, square little number with the drawing of an exciting, molting space creature on the cover, hugging a boy who looks just like me in its claws. Our dreams of being instantly rich are finished, but we are moving up nonetheless. We are saving every kopeck that comes our way via my father's junior engineering job and my mother's typing. Here's our inventory. I have my pen, my broken Chewbacca monkey, my recently circumcised penis, the Mozart candy wrapper from Vienna Airport, my Soviet atlas, and a bunch of donated T-shirts. My mother has her size 2 Harve Bernard business suit. My father has made a fishing rod out of a stick. Pounds of disgusting marked-down farmer's cheese and kasha will feed us until we die of sadness. And if I don't clear my plate of that warm crap, the thunderclap of Papa's hand rings against my temple, my mama yelling, just don't hit the head. He has to think with his head. Or Mama's week-long silent treatment will make me consider taking my own life altogether. Who are we? Parents, my biedny, we are poor folk. Why can't I have the Chewbacca with both hands? Parents, we are not Americans. But you both have jobs. Parents, we have to buy a house. Yes, a house. The first step to Americanism. Who needs two-handed Chewbacca when we will soon have our own quasi-suburban home? But at lunchtime, the Hebrew school boys do like to take out their Lukes and Obi-Wans and Yodas and set them on their desk to demonstrate just how much property falls within their purview. They talk in their already raspy Jewish voices. I threw out my old Yoda because the paint on his ears was falling off, and then I got 2 new Yodas and a Princess Leia just so Ham Solo could do her. Me, amazed. Wow. Thank you. So I wrote Lennon as Magical Goose because I wanted all that Soviet cheese, but I also wanted my grandmother to love me, and that was the easiest way to get her love. And so a terrible connection was forged in my mind that writing novels equals love. I mean, what was I thinking? Most writers today are not exactly loved. I gave a reading at a university a few years ago. I'm not going to mention the University of Oklahoma by name, but a student said, excuse me, Mr. Shteyngart, how do I know when a book's been fictionated? I said, what? She said, you know, like when it's not true. I said, well, it usually says novel on it or stories. And she said, well, thank you. I'm going to avoid those from now on because I only want things that are true. So anyway, I'm proud to have my first non-fictionated book. Yeah. USA. But back to my life after not winning the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. Because I was the red gerbil, the second most hated boy in Hebrew school, I thought, what if I wrote a science fiction novel? Maybe the kids will learn to like me. And that's when it started to happen. This is a copy of one of the first novels I wrote, Invasion from Outer Space. Hundreds of pages, neatly, meticulously written. Let's take a look inside. Chapter 1, Something is Wrong. Something was wrong. So, when I was about 11 years old, a momentous thing happened in the guise of a substitute teacher called Miss S, who had transferred into our Hebrew school. And I'll read you that little section from there. On one of her first days on the job, Miss S asked us all to bring in our favorite items in the world and to explain why they make us who we are. I bring in my latest toy, a dysfunctional Apollo rocket ship whose capsule pops off with the pop of a lever, but only under certain atmospheric condition. Humidity must be below 54%. And I explained that I've even written my own novel. This passes largely unremarked as the latest batch of My Little Ponies are paraded around. Finally, Miss S holds up a sneaker and explains that her favorite activity is jogging. P.U., a boy cries out, pointing at the sneaker and holding his nose, and everyone except me laughs their wicked child laugh. I am shocked. Here is a young, kind, pretty teacher, and the children are intimating that her feet smell. Only me and my 200-pound Leningrad fur are allowed to smell around here. I look to Miss S, so worried that she will cry, but instead she laughs and goes on about how running makes her feel good. After we have all finished explaining who we are, Miss S calls me over to her desk. You really wrote a novel, she asks. Yes, I say. It is called The Challenge. May I read it? Yes, you may read it. I will brink it. And brink it I do, with the worried admonition, please don't lose Miss S, okay? And then it happens. At the end of the English period, when a book about a mouse who has learned how to fly in an airplane has been thoroughly dissected, Miss S announces, and now Gary will read from his novel. His what? But it doesn't matter, because I'm standing there holding my composition notebook straight from the Square Deal Notebook people of Dayton, Ohio, zip code 45463. And looking out at me are the boys beneath their little flying saucer yarmulkes and the girls with their sweet aromatic bangs, their blouses studded with stars. And there's Miss S, who I'm already terribly in love with, but who I've recently learned has a fiancé, not sure what that means, can't be good. But whose bright American face is not just encouraging me, but priding me on. Am I scared? No, I am eager to begin my life. Introduction, I say. The mysterious race. Before the age of dinosaurs, there was human life on Earth. They looked just like the man of today, but they were a lot more intelligent than the man of today. Slowly, Miss S says. Read slowly, Gary. Let us enjoy the words. I breathe that in. Miss S wants to enjoy my words. And then I speak slower. They built all kinds of spaceships and other wonders, but at that time the Earth circled the moon because the moon was bigger than the Earth. One day a gigantic comet came and blew up the moon to the size it is today. As I'm reading it, despite the many errors, I'm hearing a different language come out of my mouth. The Russian accent is still thick, but I am speaking in what is more or less comprehensible English. And as I am speaking along with my strange New English voice, I am also hearing something entirely foreign to the squealing and shouting that constitutes the background noise of my Hebrew school. Silence. The children are silent. They're listening to my every word, and they will listen to the story for the next 5 weeks as well, because Miss S will designate the end of every English period as Gary novel time. And they will shout out throughout, when will Gary read already? The school is close to Long Island. And I will sit there in my chair, oblivious to all but Miss S.'s smile, excused from following the discussion of the mouse who learned how to fly, so that I may go over the words I will soon read to my adoring audience. And God bless these kids for giving me a chance. May their God bless them, everyone. So in the meantime, because most, not all, but most Soviet immigrants are fairly conservative, I've subscribed to another little magazine called The National Review. William F. Buckley Jr., editor. Margaret Thatcher on the cover, on every cover. And then I am sent a thick card featuring an American eagle sitting upon 2 rifles. That's right, Gary Shteyngart, age 11, is being welcomed into the National Rifle Association. Can't start too soon with the Second Amendment. My republicanism flourished even as I left the provinces of eastern Queens and ended up at Stuyvesant High School, the holding pen for multinational math and science nerds in Manhattan. I see at least 2 members in the front row. And then my political allegiances underwent a change. This is how it happened. On Election Day, 1988, I come to the Marriott Marquis Ballroom thinking this is the day I will finally get laid. I have volunteered for George Bush Sr.'s scorched earth election presidential campaign against the hapless Michael Dukakis, laughing along with Bush's racist, hysterical Willie Horton commercials and all they imply about the liberal Massachusetts Greek. Compassion, after all, is a virtue only rich Americans can afford. Tolerance, the purview of slick Manhattanites who already have everything that I want. I'm invited to attend what is sure to be a Republican victory party at the Marriott Marquis, the ugly slab of a building near Times Square. The invitation to the party features a scornful cartoon of the big-eared Dukakis sticking his head out of an M1 Abrams tank, the most unfortunate photo op of his campaign. And I expect an evening of arrogant crowing, of being pressed to the bosom of my fellow conservatives while dancing a Protestant hora over the grave of American liberalism. Yes, tonight is a special night. It is the night I am to meet a Republican girl from a clean white home. Her name will be Jane. Jane Carruthers, let's say. Hi, Jane. I'm Gary Shteyngart from Little Neck. My family owns a Colonial worth $280,000. I'm the brains behind a Commodore 64 program called the Family Real Estate Transaction Calculator. I go to Stuyvesant High School where my grades aren't so great, but I hope to get into the Honors College at the University of Michigan. I guess tonight it's going to be curtains for the governor of Massachusetts. I enter the ballroom, a dark, gap-toothed immigrant wearing sweat socks and brown penny loafers, and my special and only suit, a highly flammable polyester number. I navigate the room filled with sparkling Anglo-Americans clutching single malts, without a word said in my direction, without a pair of happy blue eyes reflecting the gray sheen of the crisp nylon tie I'd picked up for $2 from a Broadway vendor. As George Herbert Walker Bush racks up state after state on the big screen above us, as cheers and laughter circulate around the massively hideous ballroom, I stand alone in a corner, biting down on my plastic cup filled with ginger ale and swatting away the colorful balloons that seem to have an affinity for my static-inducing polyester. Until a pair of teenage blonde lovelies, the girls I've been waiting for all my life, finally approach me with needy smiles on their faces, one of them beckoning me to come hither with her hands. I'm so excited. I somehow fail to see myself for what I am, a short teenage boy born to a failing superpower, trapped inside a shiny gunmetal jacket, carrying about a mop of the darkest hair in the room, darker even than Michael Dukakis' Hellenic dew. Which one will be my Jane? Which one will trace the W of my weak chin with her pewter fingers? Which one will take me on her boat and introduce me to the millionaire and his wife? You know something, Daddy? Gary survived communist Russia just so he could join the GOP. I think that's very courageous, son. Would you like to throw the old pigskin around with me and Jack Kemp after cocktails? Just leave your topsiders in the mudroom. Hey, one of the lovelies says. Me, debonair, unconcerned. Hey. So I'll have a rum and Coke, just a splash of ice and a lime. Mandy, you said no ice, right? She'll have a Diet Coke, lime, no ice. I've been mistaken for the waiter. And the next day I'm a Democrat. It's shocking. I could have been part of the Florida Tea Party by now, and here I am. Could have been a hedge fund guy, whom I love. For the last section, I thought I would backtrack to our first days in America. You know, coming to this country in 1979 from the former Soviet Union, as you mentioned in the introduction, it wasn't just crossing 8 time zones. It was being teleported into a different and a much better planet. Technicolor, I think, is the right word. It was pure science fiction. It was some kind of advanced civilization. I mean, you remember the Chevrolet Corvette wasn't just a car. It looked like it was about to take off for the skies. And there was a lot of pain involved, particularly on my parents' part, the pain of losing language and culture and loved ones. But there was something very beautiful about that, too. So here's a little dispatch from coming to America for the first time. The first momentous thing that happened to me in Kew Gardens, Queens, is that I fall in love with cereal boxes. We are too poor to afford toys at this point, but we do have to eat. Cereal is food, well, sort of. It tastes grainy, easy, and light with a hint of false fruitiness. It tastes the way America feels. I'm obsessed with the fact that many cereal boxes come with prizes inside, which seem to me an unprecedented miracle, something for nothing. My favorite comes in a box of a cereal called Honeycomb, a box featuring a healthy, freckled white kid, whom I begin to accept as a very important role model, on a bike flying through the sky. What you get inside each box of Honeycomb are small license plates to be tied to the rear of your bicycle. The license plates are much smaller than the real thing, but they have a nice metallic heft to them. I keep getting Michigan, a very simple plate, white letters on a black base. I trace the word with my fingers. I speak it aloud, getting all of the sounds wrong. Michigan. What I need now, in a very serious way, is to get an actual bicycle. In America, the distance between wanting something and having it delivered right to your living room is not terribly great. I want a bike, so some rich American neighbor, they're all unspeakably rich, gives me a bike. A rusted red monstrosity with the spokes coming dangerously undone, but what do you want? I tie the license plate to the bicycle, and I spend most of my day wondering which license plate to use, citrus sunny Florida or snowy Vermont. This is what America is about, choice. I don't have much choice in pals, but there's a one-eyed girl in our building complex whom I've sort of befriended. She's tiny and scrappy and poor just like us. We're suspicious of each other at first, but I'm an immigrant and she has one eye, so we're even. The girl rides around on a half-broken bike just like mine, and she keeps falling and scraping herself. Rumor is that's how she lost her eye. And bawling whenever her palms get bloodied, her blonde head raised up to the sky. One day she sees me riding my banged-up bicycle with the Honeycomb license plate clanging behind me, and she screams, "Michigan, Michigan!" And I ride ahead, smiling and tooting my bike horn, proud of the English letters that are attached somewhere below my ass. Michigan, Michigan, with its bluish-black license plate, the color of my friend's remaining eye. Michigan, with its delicious American name. Michigan. How lucky one must be to live there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I'll be happy to take some questions or complaints. You know, there are always some complaints, which is fine. I respect that. Or general questions.
Please stand up when you ask a question, Mr. Shteyngart.
Call me Gary. Or Eager. Let's get down to brass tacks here. I'm just Eager from the block.
Will you tell the story you told on NPR about how you learned to use humor?
I told NPR, I'm sorry, I outsourced those NPR appearances to this guy in India who sounds just like me. What happened? How did I do it? Oh.
What are Jews known for? Their humor, and how you began to use it as a way of getting along.
Oh, yes. Well, so humor is important to Jews. It's kept us going for 5,000 wonderful years. What's next? I can only guess at that. But I think, you know, growing up in Russia, some of the first things I remember were Brezhnev jokes were constantly being told by my parents. This was their way of getting back at the system. But also my parents were incredibly funny. So the first joke I remember, did I tell it last time I was here? Did I tell a Brezhnev joke? I can't remember. Well, it's perfect for today because it coincides with the Olympics, the wonderful Sochi Olympics. This is my 41st year of completely ignoring the Winter Olympics. I'm very proud of that. But the joke is about the 1980 Moscow Olympics. This is a wonderful joke that Jews in Russia told all the time. So Brezhnev has to give an Olympic speech, but he's completely, you know, all those years of drinking, he's barely there. So he climbs up to the podium, he can barely walk or read, and he picks up the Olympic speech, and he has to start reading, and starts reading. His assistant runs up and says, "Comrade General Secretary, those are just the Olympic rings." So that's a nice kind of joke because it's very performative, it's satirical, it casts aspersions on the powers that be. And in Hebrew school, I continued that tradition by writing, as a fellow refugee of Solomon Schechter, there were all these rabbis screaming at us, you know, especially Russians. They're like, one rabbi actually said something like, "It's because you eat pork that the Holocaust happened." which to an 11-year-old is shocking. I'm like, how on earth did my pork eating cause it? But can't argue with the rabbis. So I even wrote a version of the Torah called the Genorah, in which, Exodus became Sexodus. It got very racy. And it turned out that instead of Sarah, the sort of progenitor of our nation was Brooke Shieldowitz. That was our dream, that we had all descended from Brooke Shields somehow. And anyway, that's how I made my first American friends, through that kind of Jewish humor.
Do you go back to St. Petersburg or Russia often now?
Yeah, the question is, do I go back to Petersburg often? After the completion of this book, which was about a year ago, not so much. Before that, almost every year or every other year, because I like to suffer too. Life shouldn't just be fun. And I promote my books there when they're translated into Russian. The reviews are always amazing. Balding traitor betrays motherland is a good one. That was a good review. All downhill from there. And within this book, the last chapter, I don't want to give away too much, but the last chapter is a very kind of, I bring my parents back. They haven't been back in 30 years, even though I've been back a lot. So I bring them back to see what they've left.
Which humor do you find more appealing? Ruski humor or American humor?
Ruski or American humor? Well, so much of the culture of both countries is influenced by Jewish humor, going back to your question, that I feel that, from Seinfeld to Steinfeld, there's a very thin line, And I always think of it as this kind of exasperated, almost humor from the edge of the grave, what next kind of humor. So I think all the Jews that fled from Tsarist Russia probably had the same kind of Brezhnev joke going on about the Tsar, And that humor was inculcated in their children and then passed on from generation to generation. So, many ethnicities have something to be proud of. I wish food was something we could do better. I turn to the Italians and the French for that. But in terms of humor, this is it. This is state of the art. Oh, my landsman from Stuyvesant, yes.
What brings you back to Russia? Why do you go back so often?
Why do I go back so often? This book and other books, but especially this book, has been trying to understand my own upbringing, meant trying to understand the kind of people my parents were and are. And that's a difficult thing to do, because you're brought to this country, you're thrown into this melting pot. Your parents have very clear goals. They have to work hard and make sure that you end up at Stuyvesant like we did, and then possibly a better college than I went to, possibly one you went to, and then possibly a better job than I did, and possibly one you ended up in. So you're constantly in this flux of you want to please them, but at the same time you have your own ideas about who to be. And in my 20s and earlier, I was very angry at my parents that they wouldn't accept me for being a writer, that they wanted me to be something I wasn't. There was this sense of rage and feeling, why can't they loosen up and be soft the way Americans are soft? Going back to Russia, and especially writing this book, that rage has filtered away and been replaced by a kind of sadness and sorrow, not for me, but for them, because I've learned what their lives were like. I learned the first 4 memories that my father had, which were jumping under a train that was being evacuated from Leningrad as the German bombers were bombing it, being evacuated to a village which had very little food. His best friend died of some disease or starvation. 3 or 5 years old, we're talking about. His cousin jumping out of a window as these rats were pursuing her because the rats were eating kids. And the 4th thing, somebody coming up to the door and saying that his father had died. He was a soldier trying to break out of the front in Leningrad. So those are the 4 memories that he remembers at first. And then he spent a lot of his youth hiding under a table, crying, singing opera, which he loved so much, and trying to go back in time in his mind and kill Hitler before any of this could happen, And he wanted to be an opera singer very badly. And I was always thinking, if he was born in a normal country, maybe his beautiful voice would have happened, a normal, non-anti-Semitic country. So going back with my parents and finding out what their lives have been like really changed the way I saw them. And I think that's why, I even without them, I keep trying to go back to Russia, trying to see what it's like. And I remember the first trip in my 20s, walking down Nevsky Prospect, the main street of St. Petersburg, and smiling like an idiot, because that's what Americans do, ha, top of the morning to you, and people thinking, what the hell is wrong with that smiling loser, And over the years, I've learned to smile less and be depressed more. And that's the gift that Russia keeps on giving.
When did your parents stop thinking of you as a little failure?
When did my parents stop thinking of me as a little failure? Never. I think, when did I really do okay with my books? I think fiscal year 2006. When Absurdistan did really well, my second novel, I think they were okay. Because, yeah, they're like, maybe we don't have to, send away for the Harvard law school applications anymore. Although I married a lawyer, so it all worked out well.
Do your parents read your books, and if so, what do they say about them? And how do they feel about the portrayal of themselves in this one?
They haven't read Little Failure. I mean, I've sent them a copy. I don't know if they've read it or not. They usually wait, because their English isn't perfect, they usually wait for the Russian editions to come out. The previous 3 books have been translated. I don't know if the rights to this one have been sold yet. I haven't been called a balding traitor in the last couple of weeks, so probably not. At my wedding, Deborah Treisman, the editor of The New Yorker, came up to my father and said, what do you think of your son's work? And he said, the first one was okay. Which in Russian Jewish terms is a huge compliment, so very thankful for that. The first one was okay.
So coming from your perspective, having come from Russia, are you optimistic about America now, given everything that's going on?
My dream was always that Russia would become more and more like America and would build a solid middle class, would develop a civic and a civil society, more democracy, not less. In weird ways, sometimes feel like America's become more and more like Russia. And by that I mean, very simply, what I mean by that is the hollowing out of the middle class. And the middle class is the most important thing to the rest of it, to civil society, to anything. You need people, you need a strong, educated middle class. Otherwise, you have a disaster. And the destruction of the American middle class has been very sad. And I'm not pointing fingers. I don't want to launch into a political argument of who and what, but it's happening. There's no question about it. I live in Manhattan Island, which is a tiny island of millionaires, many of whom fly in from Shanghai or Sao Paulo. But I also spend half the year in upstate New York, where you see a completely different picture of what America looks like. And it's a fading America, and that's what scares me the most. That's what I would love to see reversed. And I would love Russia to have the middle class as well, because then all this other nonsense, the Putinism, the homophobia, all that, I think, will taper off as well. That's my dream anyway.
Having been punished with a Solomon Schechter education, would you send your children there?
So let's see, Schechter, Stuyvesant, Oberlin, that's my trajectory. Schechter, maybe not. There's not one in Manhattan anyway. Stuyvesant, yes, if the kid can get in, but I'm not going to push him to be a math and science whiz. My father taught me with Soviet textbooks. Because the American textbooks at Schechter were 4 doggies are on one page, and then one goes away. How many doggies you got? But my dad had x cosine to the f square, and in these Russian ridiculous 3rd grade textbooks that were meant for graduate school at the University of Miami. I'm not making fun of the University of Miami. I am saying they were very advanced. So I don't know if my kid, I'm not going to push him like that. He can watch Dora the Explorer, whatever the hell kids watch these days. So Stuyvesant, if he gets into, fine. I'm fine with not paying, $78,000 a year now in New York private school fees. Oberlin, I think, is okay too. I was a real misfit there, but I was a poor kielbasa-fueled immigrant kid. That's not the kind of person Oberlin, you should send somebody when you're comfortable, and let him hang out and wear ironic janitor outfits and grow an ironic mustache and drive an ironic Subaru and all the other things that kids at Oberlin do. That's fine, I just wasn't ready for it. But so yes, so Stuyvesant, if he gets in, Oberlin, sure. Yeah. Schechter, lo, as they say in his niet. Well, a good yeshiva, a nice reformed one, yeah. Like, you know, when they all hug each other and sing nice songs and dance multiculturally. Yeah.
Were you a paralegal?
Yes, sir. I admit it. I was a paralegal. How did you know?
Read about it.
Oh, yeah.
What field and with what firm?
Oh, I was a paralegal for a firm called Lancer and Kubitschek. It's a small civil rights law firm in Manhattan. And they were all Oberlin grads running it too. It was, I mean, you know, they were nice people. They had a nice thing going. But I was the world's worst paralegal. I don't know how to work well or hard or at all. So I'd show up at 9:12 instead of 9, and then I'd have my 2-hour breakfast, which is how I live now, you know. And then there would be the hour of crying where I just lock myself in the office and cry, and then 2 hours for novel writing. Then I'd have psychoanalysis. It really didn't leave much time for lawyering, but it was a great law firm. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Would you like a paralegal job with Miami's oldest firm?
Yeah, I would love a paralegal job with Miami's oldest firm. Do I get keys to the paralegal's crapper and all that? Woo! Well, thank God, because no one buys books anymore. So I am so ready to move here, work as a paralegal, and then retire. Thank you. My first job offer. I've only been here 4 hours. Yeah.
With all your mockery of Russia, obviously you come from a culture that goes back with enormous richness. Here we have 200 years of history, and had you not had that richness to work with, would you be writing the kind of book you're writing?
No, probably not. You know, the beauty of Russia is that it's perfect for a certain kind of writer. It's perfect for satirists. Russia is the land that gave Gogol to the world, that gave Dead Souls to the world. Satire thrives when evil and stupidity collide, and that's been Russia for a very long time. And Putin has raised it to new heights. And that's why it's so wonderful to see so much great writing come out of Russia. Tatiana Tolstoy, Vladimir Sorokin, Viktor Pelevin, all these wonderful writers who have capitalized off a society that's completely run amok. The worse things get for Russia, the better they seem to get for Russia's artists, and especially its writers. Recently I got into a terrible, problematic snafu when I inadvertently insulted Canadian literature for not being risky enough. This is why they gave me this cold I got in Toronto. They injected me with some kind of SARS-like thing at the airport. And that was a stupid thing to say because, yes, Margaret, I was in a drunken stupor, as the mayor of Toronto likes to say when I said that. But, you know, Margaret Atwood and Alice Munro certainly are wonderful writers. But I was a judge of literary, the biggest literary prize in Canada. And what I often wonder is, you know, is a country that has so little inequality and where the society seems to be pretty much on track, does that provide enough material for writers who want something other than just quiet, introspective works, which can be wonderful as well, obviously, Alice Munro, Chekhov, etc. But it doesn't provide quite the fodder it needs for a grander political or riskier or social kind of, except now with Rob Ford, anything is possible. So I do predict a glorious era of Canadian literature, all based on the consumption of crack cocaine.
How did the process of writing a memoir differ from writing a novel? And I have another question.
Oh boy, two-parter.
How did Cheng Riley react to your very nice words about him?
Cheng Riley was my mentor at Hunter College, and he got me my first book deal. The interview where I drunkenly spoke of Canada was done between me and him. It was me and him being interviewed by a New York magazine. You can look it up online in New York Mag. It gets very wild. We insult a lot of stuff. Cheng Riley was a wonderful mentor, and you know, when I was writing The Russian Deb at that time, he read it and he said, "It's a good comedy of manners, but where's the blood and guts of the story?" And that meant going into the immigrant berserk and not just, you know, writing funny, but trying to go deeper. And Russian Debutante went a little bit deeper. I was, you know, in my 20s when I wrote that. And when you're in your 20s, you're just trying to be funny and clever, etc. Writing this was much more difficult because there's humor in it. I mean, hopefully the parts I read had some funny stuff, right? But the other parts of this book are somewhat sadder, I think, because in a memoir you can't quite use humor as a safety net the way you can with writing satire. In satire, you have to lead with the humor. I mean, that's what your readers expect. And I think with each book, after Absurdist and Super Sad, I think was a little less humorous and a little bit deeper. And this book, I think, is a kind of also a culmination of this, this 4-volume series on Russian immigrant Russian Jews. After this book, I don't think I can return to that theme for a while. The larder is bare. The cupboard is bare. I mean, it's all in here. The first interview I did was with the wonderful writer Francine Prose of Interview Magazine. And she said, after I read Little Failure, I know you more than I know my husband of 20 years. So now we'll have to write about something else, like wasps. If anyone knows one, just send me an email, They're not around these parts, but my readings in Vermont will probably attract at least one. So wish me luck. I've been ignoring this side. Does anyone have a question? Sorry, my head turns this way. No? There? Oh, yeah.
What are you working on now, if you don't mind sharing?
What am I working on now? On this tour. It's 149 days of touring to places I've never heard of. Melbourne? Where the hell is that? Selling a book is hard these days. You got to get on your knees and say, please. My dachshund is starving, So that's what I'm working on now. But I don't know what to write next. I think I want to write, in my last book, Super Sad, whatever, there was a female character, a 24-year-old Korean-American girl named Eunice Park, and I really loved writing from her point of view. So I think I want a strong female heroine in the next book. So in addition to meeting wasps, I'll have to meet women as well. It's a twofer. Yeah.
When you write, is there anything you listen to while you write?
This is a tragic answer to this question. What do I listen to? Kraftwerk, the German noise band. Because there's almost no lyrics. Lyrics trip me up, but hearing a German going wie also robots tun 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 for hours on end is very conducive. But over headphones so that no one in my family will kill me. Yes, Kraftwerk and only Kraftwerk. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And I would just like to personally thank Gary for making Miami a tour stop each time he comes. And I also hope he accepts that job afterwards, because we would love to have him living here. So anyway, thank you, Gary. Thank you all for coming. The book signing will happen on the other side of the store. We have plenty of books at both registers. So, and also, please feel